This new model of the APR-25 and APR-26 can do a lot for an F-4 pilot, but it cannot do everything. It can spell out the threats that you're encountering. It can point out the azimuth of those threats. It can flash warning lights when a SAM site is getting ready to launch or has launched a missile. And it'll light up a large red warning light whenever a SAM has been launched in your area. But the system cannot tell you what to do. A pilot has to get himself so checked out on this gear that he can instantaneously interpret these warning lights on his threat indicator unit and sort out the most serious threats showing on his scope. There are areas in North Vietnam where aircraft can find themselves being painted by as many as 6 fan songs at one time. If your F-4's mission ever takes you into a situation like that, there's no time to start wishing that you had mastered the intricacies and possibilities of this little radar homing and warning black box. Captain, since you're here for training on this system, and I understand that you're going to have a lot to do with raw training back at your base, I want to introduce you to this new APR-25 model and how it'll be used in the F-4. The purpose of my briefing is to make you aware not only of the capabilities of this equipment, but also to make you aware of the limitations of your knowledge concerning the full possibilities of this radar directional warning system. I know that you have a basic idea of the various enemy radar threats and of what the early model of the APR-25 could do. The outward simplicity of this equipment may fool you into thinking that you know all about it after you run through the first basic operations. However, if you and your fellow air crewmen are going to hope to stay alive under combat conditions, you are going to have to become aware of the full potentials and limitations of the APR-25. The APR-25 contains all of these components, but in your cockpit you will see only the azimuth indicator, the threat display unit, and the band disable switches. Most of the F-4s and other fighters have only the India band switch. In the forward cockpit of the F-4, the scope will be mounted here. The threat display unit, or billboard as we call it, is here. In the rear cockpit, the scope and billboard are here. And your band disabled switch panel is here. I know that you have seen the film on the earlier model of the APR-25, so I want to point out the modifications and improvements on this new model. The logics in this new model are more sophisticated than in earlier TAC models. False signals have been greatly reduced. More threats have been added to the billboard. I might point out certain new construction features that have added to the reliability and durability of the system. For better shock resistance, the system now uses cast boxes in place of sheet metal construction. Test points are located on top of the logic boards for easy access. Individual circuit boards can be easily removed and replaced in the field. Each card is keyed so that only the correct card may be inserted in the position for which it is intended. The system now uses the new band designation, as you'll see on the billboard here. Let's see if you can figure out this new arrangement of the threat display unit.
Let's see now. Starting on the left side, the India band is the new designation for threats that used to be listed in the former X band?
Correct. The India band covers the frequencies from 7 to 11 gigahertz.
The former Charlie band threats are now designated as the Golf band, covering the frequencies from 4.4 to 5.8 gigahertz. The new Echo band covers threats formerly in the S band within the frequencies of 2.4 to 3.6 gigahertz.
Before we go any further, I want to run through the simplified self-test procedures which you use before takeoff, or at any time you might suspect damage or failure in the equipment. The power switch, of course, needs to be on and the system warmed up for about 10 seconds. You may start at any point with the self-test, But to be orderly, let's start at the left side of the billboard and work to the right. You depress the India SAM switch. When you release it, the test starts with the low light flipping on briefly. Then the high light comes on for 2 to 4 seconds before turning off, followed by a brief flash of the low light. Watch this test sequence again. More important in this test, though, is the test pattern on the scope. For the India band, there should be 4 dashed line strobes at 45-degree angles off the center line. All 4 strobes should be of equal length. Each strobe must be at least 2.5 rings long or more. If these strobes are not equal to each other, call A&E immediately. Note that the golf band strobes are a series of pearl-shaped dots. Inasmuch as the bottom of the Loro switch is unused at present, only the Loro light will show in the self-test. It, too, has the pearl-shaped dots of golf band strobes. The E-band strobes are solid lines. You test both the E-SAM and the AAA circuits. This self-test checks everything in the system except the antennas. It starts with the crystals in each preamp and goes right down through the entire system in the scope. To prove it, let us suppose that you had damage or a malfunction in this preamp. You run your self-test. The strobe is missing in that quadrant. This warns you that you cannot detect a threat from that quadrant.
That reminds me. I've heard that you have a simple device for illustrating how azimuth is determined by the system.
Right. Here is a rough simulator with 4 APR-25 antennas mounted on it, somewhat as on a regular service aircraft. At the nose of the aircraft are 2 antennas offset from the center line at 45 degrees. At the tail are 2 more antennas mounted in the same way. We have a high-power E-band test set out there. The scope shows the threat at about 10 o'clock. As the aircraft turns toward the target, the signals hit both of the nose antennas with equal strength. With both preamplifiers receiving the same signal strength, they pull the strobe between them to the 12 o'clock position, which is an accurate representation of the azimuth of the threat, as you can see. A 180-degree turn by the aircraft away from the signal would pull the strobe to the 6 o'clock position. The A&E people use this high-power test equipment for ground testing your APR-25 and 26 from the antennas right down through the whole system. I'll use our azimuth demonstrator unit here to give you an idea of how this test is conducted. The test takes 2 men, one in the cockpit to check the APR-25 and 26 displays, the other to operate the high-power test unit. And there is a separate test unit for each threat band. Captain, would you please stand by the display as though you were the man in the cockpit? Watch how this unit tests the E-band of the system. This unit can beam out an exact simulation of a threat signal to check whether you're getting proper azimuth indication and whether the logics can identify a threat. Like this. You have an E-band strobe at 10:30, a true azimuth indication on our test unit here. And the billboard identifies the signal as an E-SAM high. The high-power test equipment beams a signal to the aircraft's left forward antenna from this transmitting antenna that is protected by a fiberglass cover on the unit. If the high-power test unit's antenna is beamed directly at that right forward antenna, you'll get an azimuth indication of 130, 45 degrees to the right. If the aircraft turns head-on, and if your APR-25 is working properly, you will get an azimuth presentation like this. The HPTS also checks the logics in the system and their ability to select only the PRF rates of incoming signals that match the parameters of specific threats. Like this. Our test unit is set to transmit an ESAM high signal. Next, the PRF selector is set to the A position. The A setting produces a pulse recurrence frequency that is just below the range, which the logics in the APR-25 will recognize as that of a fan song. You will not get an E-band strobe, and your threat display unit stays dark, correctly indicating that the signal is not that of a threat. When the PRF selector is moved to the B setting, you should now get an ESAM high with a strobe. You should continue to get an ESAM high light with the PRF C setting. But when you go to the delta position, the highest PRF setting, you're above the pulse recurrence frequency of a fan song. The strobe on the scope will disappear because the logics have now sorted out this pulse frequency rate as one that is not coming from a threat radar. The next step, of course, would be to test the ESAM low logics of your APR-25. The high-power test unit can also test your AAA and spot SAM logics. In this manner, an A&E crew can quickly and accurately check out the entire APR-25 and 26 systems right on the ramp. The unit has a circuit and a Charlie band antenna to transmit simulated guidance signals for testing your APR-26. There are separate, ruggedly built units for each of the three threat bands: Echo, Golf, and India. Each of these high-power test units has provisions for testing one particular band of the APR-25 and 26. A&E can quickly do a thorough job of testing the system in the aircraft. Now, there are some threats listed with which you may not be familiar. You see an India SAM threat. This refers to Russia's most advanced system, the SA-3. You are not equipped to indicate this guidance signal or a launch, so you must take your action on the ISAM indication. Although the SA-3 has not been seen yet outside of Russia, we will not be surprised nor unprepared if it suddenly turns up in North Vietnam. This India band SA-3 radar system, unlike the SA-2 system, uses an echo band guidance system instead of the usual guidance band, which we used to call the L band, or as we now designate it, the Charlie band. AIWX refers to signals received from all weather fighters possessing conical scan type radars, friendly as well as enemy. And AI day signals are from day fighters with range-only type radars. You'll have to use the regular established methods of identifying friend from foe, visual, audio, and so forth. GSAM low refers to a golf band fan song in low PRF. It's acquisition mode. The audio of this signal is the usual rattlesnake sound of a fan song. The golf SAM high light will come on when that radar goes to a high PRF tracking mode, which it uses when it gets serious about a target. Note the audio change to a higher pitch. So far, these advanced golf band radars have not been observed outside of Russia, except in Cuba, where they were installed and operated by Russian crews. When, as a result of the confrontation, the Russians left, they took these more advanced radars home with them. Remember, both the Echo and the golf band fan songs use a horizontal trough to scan an area 20 degrees wide, 16 times a second, with a beaver tail-shaped beam that is 10 degrees high. The thickness of that scanning beam is different for the Echo band than for the other. It is 1.7 degrees thick, whereas the golf band beam is just 1 degree thick. At a frequency 60 megahertz higher, the vertical antenna of the Echo band fan song scans an area 20 degrees high, 16 times a second, with a beam 10 degrees wide by 1.7 degrees thick. The Golf band fan song differs in that its vertical beam is 100 megahertz higher than its horizontal beam, and its scanning beam is only 1 degree thick. The 10-degree square within which the two beams intersect is the area in which a fan song can make a kill on a target. In addition to the usual Charlie band guidance dish antenna on the end of the horizontal target, the Golf band fan song carries two other dish antennas. The fan song operator has the option of concentrating his transmitted power by switching from his trough antennas to these dish antennas. The full power of the horizontal beam is now transmitted through one of these dish antennas, which uses a 2-degree circular-shaped beam to sweep a horizontal area 8 degrees wide 16 times a second. The other dish antenna covers a vertical area 8 degrees high with a 2-degree round beam at 16 times per second. Thus, the Golf band fan song can concentrate the full power of both beams within a 2-degree target circle instead of the usual 10-degree square. Because these dish antennas use the same 16 cycle per second sweep rate, the Golf band fan song retains the characteristic rattlesnake sound. And the billboard still warns you with a Golf Sam low or a Golf Sam high light when the operator switches to his precision tracking mode on his dish antennas. Using these dish antennas gives the fan song operator slightly greater capability against small, maneuvering, or low-level targets, or in the presence of jamming. You will probably be unaware that this mode of operation is being used, for it will make no difference in your scope or billboard displays.
Colonel, I can't remember just what that Laurel light represents in the Golf band.
LORO, or low long receive only, indicates a non-scanning mode these advanced Golf band fan songs use against small, maneuvering, or low-level targets, or it is used in the presence of jamming. If your LORO light comes on and you get a steady tone like this on your audio, this indicates that the fan song is transmitting with its dish antennas and receiving with its two trough antennas. The dishes each emit a steady 2-degree pencil beam at high PRF, right at the target like searchlights. The rattlesnake sound is replaced by a steady whine, since the dishes no longer scan at 16 cycles per second. The echoes from the target are now being received by the horizontal and vertical troughs, which are scanning the target like a pair of radio direction-finding systems. This LORO mode is good against jamming. In fact, if you're using plain noise jammers against any LORO-equipped fan song, the enemy operator doesn't even need to turn on his radar transmitters. He just needs to have those trough antennas receiving like radio direction finders. You will get no warning on your billboard that he is tracking you until suddenly your APR-26 comes up with an activity, and then a launch light. Tracking only on your jamming signal, he can guide his SAM in for the kill. That is just one of many ways in which you can get zapped if you start underestimating the enemy and drop your guard for a few seconds. However, to get back to that LORO warning light, if you hear that steady tone and see the LORO warning light on your billboard, you'll know that Golf band fan song can launch a SAM any moment now, like this.
Is there any control on that audio gain, Colonel, such as that audio knob on the right there?
You can turn the volume down if things get too noisy at times, but you should leave it up the rest of the time as an additional means of alerting you to new threats.
Now, let me see whether or not I can remember the E-band threats. The ESAM designations here refer to the SA2 threat, as I recall.
ESAM low would be a warning that a fan song is in low PRF, his long-range mode. Lately, to avoid detection, the Reds hardly ever use this mode in North Vietnam. They use other acquisition radars to keep track of you, and then they suddenly pop right on you in high PRF. ESAM high indicates the fan song is in high PRF for precision tracking on a target.
When you see this ESAM high, you can expect that the fan song may launch a SAM at any instant. When the enemy operator turns on his guidance transmitter on the standby or low power mode, you'll get an amber light under your activity switch here, meaning that a SAM launch sequence is in process.
When you get a bright red light under this launch indicator, you'll know that he is in the high power mode and that a SAM launch is imminent. In addition, you may encounter cases where the activity warning never switches to launch, even when he is in the high power mode. This will occur if he is already in the high power mode when you first pick him up with your receiver. However, you'll notice that with either an activity or launch light, your scope will indicate which SAM site is transmitting a guidance signal. The strobe of that threat will pulse at 3 cycles per second, so that at a glance you'll know the azimuth of the fan song that is about to or has launched a SAM. This new Spot SAM modification offers a more positive and rapid means of warning a pilot when he is the target of a fan song. When a fan song has turned on its Charlie band guidance signal, the APR-26 side of your system will, as usual, show an activity light. When you get a red launch light on your APR-26 display, this indicates that the site has progressed to the final launch stage, but you won't know whether or not you are the target. With the new correlation and Spot SAM modification, if you are in the 10-degree window, the AS or acquisition sector light will come on. Now, by pressing the AS light, the correlation will blank out all other threats from the scope, except just the one that has its finger on you. When that fan song starts sending guidance corrections, the DMOD modification to the APR-26 will cause your red launch light to flash on and off, and will automatically blank all other strobes from your scope. Now at this point, you know that one of those fan songs has you locked in its sight. But which one? The Spot SAM offers an instant way of spotting which SAM has the finger on you by showing on the APR-25 scope only the strobe of that threat. As soon as that Spot SAM AS light shows and you press it, it will clear your APR-25 scope, leaving just the one fan song strobe that has you in its sight. This Spot SAM modification can save precious seconds in choosing the proper escape tactic. This Spot SAM modification does one other real healthy thing. It destroys any hope that you may not be the target. If the Spot SAM light goes out, you'll know that you are no longer in the center of the tracking beam. You are no longer the target. However, any time that you have an activity or launch light, you can press the AS light to blank other strobes from your scope. By this means, you can continue to keep track of the SAM site, even though you are not in the center of his beam. These new modifications offer considerable advantages to a pilot. In addition to the usual activity and launch lights on his APR-26 part of the system, the new DMOD modification warns him with a flashing red launch light that a fan song is transmitting corrections to a missile with its guidance signal. And automatically the scope is blanked of every signal except the one fan song that is tracking him. Instantly then he can know the azimuth of this deadly threat. Secondly, the Spot SAM AS light tells him definitely when he is the target of a fan song. Thirdly, when he gets that AS light, he can actuate the correlation modification by pressing the Spot SAM light. This will clear his scope of all strobes, except that of the fan song that has him locked in his sights. The configuration of these modifications differs on various aircraft. Make certain your air crews know how it works in their aircraft.
I do have a question about one of those threat indicators on the billboard, that AAA warning light. What's the AI part of that threat? Does that refer to the E-band air intercept signals, such as the range-only radars on some MiG-17s and 19s?
Right. Now, can you figure out how you determine the difference between an E-band air intercept warning and a AAA radar signal?
I would expect the audio of a AAA in loose track or acquisition mode to sound noticeably different from an echo band air intercept, but won't they sound very much alike when the AAA is on a tight lockup on you?
You're right. Here's a AAA in loose track. Now, an E-band AI. Next, the AAA in tight track on you versus the AI. However, if you get in a multiple signal environment, these differences may not be so easily detected.
I suppose that you'd have to refer to your scope, your threat indicators. You could expect an airborne signal to do some moving around, like that one at 1 o'clock, which appears to be making a head-on pass just to our right. That strobe at 10 o'clock, however, appears to be a ground radar. It maintains a more stable azimuth bearing.
You're correct, Captain. Now, have you noticed this AAA defeat button over here? If you depress this switch, you can blank out E-band AAAs and air intercepts. This enables you to isolate E-band strobes that represent fan songs, such as this one at 8 o'clock. If you get in a crowded signal environment, this can be quite helpful in locating your most serious threats. For demonstration purposes, our scope is cluttered with some India and echo band signals. Let's suppose that you were receiving all of these signals and you wanted to sort out the more relevant threats. You use your AAA defeat switch to get rid of the AAA. You could also remove the I-band signals with the band disable switch, leaving only an E-band fan song strobe. You've now determined the azimuth of this dangerous threat and have a good idea of the strength of the signal by the length of the strobe. But don't leave your I-band signals cut off any longer than necessary. You don't want to be blind to fast-appearing airborne threats. There are several things about this AAA defeat circuit that can occur on a combat mission that you should know. Suppose that you have actuated your AAA defeat switch in order to concentrate on a fan song signal. You're driving home an attack on that SAM site, which has gone to high PRF. When you get in close to the target, the strength of that fan song signal will override your defeat circuit and the AAA logics to trip your AAA warning. Of course, during an actual attack, you'll probably be too busy to notice a false alarm like this. Now, let's take another example of how a certain type of signal can override the logics in your APR-25 and give you one of the few other false signals you'll get in this model. You're jinking along on a mission with your AAA defeat switch punched in, blanking out fire cans so that you can get a clear look at any fan songs that might appear. Suddenly you get an ESAM low and a AAA warning on your billboard, even though your AAA defeat light stays on. You get even more serious about your jinking. Shortly, the ESAM low drops out, together with the AAA warning. You never got an ESAM high, nor an activity light. Moreover, you didn't even get a fan song strobe on your scope to match that ESAM low warning light. It could have been a fan song, and it's wise that you reacted as you did. But sometimes when you get one of the older type of AAA fire control radars, a whiff, it can override your AAA defeat, trip your ESAM low light and your AAA warning. In one of its modes, the whiff has a PRF similar to a fan song in low PRF. If a whiff is pointed in your direction, even at a very considerable distance, it will override your AAA defeat and light up your ESAM low and AAA warning. Note that your AAA defeat light stays on. Your AAA defeat can be overridden in another way. If you're in a dense signal environment with at least 3 or more fire cans nearby, those AAA radars will override your defeat switch and bring on your AAA warning light together with an ESAM high. Perhaps the best way to learn how TAC uses this APR-25 radar warning system is to learn by doing. I want you to start out by trying to use the APR-25 on a simplified problem. Let's suppose that you are flying at a high altitude on a course somewhat parallel to the DMZ in Vietnam. How would you interpret this display on your APR-25?
I have an ESAM low. That's a fan song in low PRF. It's long-range mode. I can hear that rattlesnake sound. My scope shows a fan song at 12 o'clock. He's gone to high PRF. He's tracking a target. He could launch a SAM at any instant. The activity light indicates the SAM launch sequence is progressing. A SAM launch is imminent.
The example that we just went through is a simple laboratory exercise. You'll note that we did not discuss what defensive action you should have taken. Right now, I want to stick to showing you the capabilities and limitations of the APR-25. Let's set up a situation in which an F-4 encounters a multiple threat signal environment. See if you can use the controls on the panel here to clear this scope enough to find the azimuth of the fan song signal, which at present is lost in this massive strobe.
My billboard and scope indicate that I'm getting several E-band threats as well as India band signals. If I'm supposed to find the azimuth of the fan song among this group of threats, I believe that I would first get rid of the AAA signal. That leaves me these 2 E-band strobes, which I can assume are fan songs.
Correct.
That gives me a SAM site at 2 o'clock and one at 4 o'clock. Wait a minute. What happened?
You'll recall that if you're in close to a fan song, that will override your AAA defeat circuit and light up your AAA threat light.
One of those fan songs has gone to high PRF, and he turned on his guidance beam. See that strobe pulsing? It tells me which SAM site is getting ready to launch a missile. That red warning indicates the launch process is underway, or that a SAM may already be in the air. All I can say, sir, is that if this were to happen in real life, I certainly hope that I started all of the proper defensive tactics long before this.
Amen. Of course, we've been setting up some lab examples here that may only slightly resemble real-life situations. I can see that you understand the basic operation of the APR-25, but out in combat areas, the use of this or any other raw equipment is not a cut-and-dried matter. Our hunter-killer aircraft in Vietnam have succeeded in making a number of kills on SAM sites. This has left the remaining fan songs jumpy about revealing their positions. They're now trying a number of deceptive tactics, some of which are rather wild. I'm going to set you up with an example and let you see what you can do with it. This is not a case history, but it is based upon actual events and represents what could happen. Let's say that you are flying alone on a recon mission at over 40,000 feet, and you get a display like this on your APR-25. How would you interpret it?
I see AAA strobes on my scope around 3 o'clock with a few fairly weak AIs around 8 and 10 o'clock. I appear to be flying at a right angle to the fire cans. With my altitude at 40,000 feet, I would judge that those fire cans are no great danger to me. But I suspect that there could be a fan song with those AAA. To double check, I actuate my AAA defeat switch. This wipes out all of the echo band strobes I had. I can see no threats against which I'm vulnerable at this time. Wait a minute. A fan song somewhere down there has just turned on his Charlie band guidance signal. The red launch light appears to indicate that there is a Charlie band guidance signal present and that a SAM has been launched or ready for launch. However, there are no ESAM threat lights showing. There are no fan song strobes showing on the scope. I've heard of fan songs turning on only their guidance signals to startle our aircraft into dumping their flights into the weeds. There, they would discover they had been tricked into a setup for ACAC batteries to pick them off. I suspect this fan song is trying this on me, trying to trick me into doing a split S that'll drop me right down into a concentration of AAA fire up ahead.
Captain, have you noticed your APR-25 displays?
Well, I see that I now have a fan song in high PRS tracking mode. The strobe is pulsing at 3 cycles per second to indicate that thread is the one which has its guidance signal working.
How do you interpret what's happening now, Captain?
I think that he's been bluffing up to this time, but he sees that he's not going to scare me into dumping my flight. I think that he's now decided to take a shot at me, and has gone to tracking on me, and has probably launched a SAM against me. It's time for me to initiate immediate defensive action.
Captain, it's way past that time. In fact, you may have almost run out of time. You have just a few seconds before receiving a most unwelcome visitor.
How could that be, sir? How could he possibly hit me without turning on his tracking radar long before this?
Well, here is what was occurring on the ground when you first picked up a AAA concentration on your right at 3 o'clock. The fire cans were busy tracking you and forwarding that information to the fan song crew, whose radar was hot and ready, but switched to standby. The fan song crew used the AAA tracking information to calculate your projected flight path with several estimated intercept points. With your aircraft flying a steady, predictable course, a good fan song crew now had all it needed to launch a SAM without transmitting anything more than its Charlie band guidance signal. It didn't have to use its Echo band track-while scan transmitters until the last few seconds of that SAM's flight. The fan song crew launched a SAM and guided it toward T2, point time 2. This point had been calculated to be the position your F-4 would reach some 20 seconds before the SAM was expected to make a kill on your aircraft. When you first received warning that the fan song had started to send echo band tracking signals, you were at point time 2. The SAM was not just being launched. It was only 20 seconds or less away from you. With you at point time 2, the fan song operator switched his radar from standby to tracking. This enabled him to track you and guide his SAM on a 3-point tracking system during the last few seconds of flight. By not turning on his echo band radar earlier, he tricked you into thinking you were safe. You kept a straight and level course, which was ideal for a SAM attack. All a good fan song operator needed in a case like yours was the last few seconds to guide the SAM in for a kill.
Now, just a minute, sir. Wasn't there a modification on the APR-25 and 26 that would warn me that a fan song was sending guidance signals to its missile? That would have warned me a lot sooner than the last 20 seconds.
Touche, Captain. If your system had been equipped with that combination of the spot SAM, correlation, and DMOD modifications, the DMOD section would have saved you. The moment that fan song started sending guidance corrections to the SAM, the DMOD modification would have caused your red launch light to start flashing, indicating instantly to you that trouble could be on the way. However, if you don't have these latest modifications, your APR-25 does definitely warn you of guidance signal activity, and that is no time to relax and continue on a straight and level course without becoming fully alert. It must be emphasized that your equipment has the full capabilities to warn you of attacks like this. Of course, the enemy can start using some wild tactics, such as lobbing a SAM in your general direction, like an artillery shell, in the hope of making a lucky hit. But he cannot make an effective attack against you without tipping his hand one way or another. And at this point, it becomes a matter of you matching wits with that enemy operator. If you're flying a high-altitude mission, it's wise to assume that you may run into the unexpected. Keep alert with all of your equipment. If you detect enemy radars in your area, such as these AAAs that could be used to secure tracking information to be fed to a fan-song crew, your APR-25 gives you azimuth and a warning that you can expect trouble. A concentration of AAA strobes like this is not to be disregarded nor underestimated. If you get an activity light, you should assume that the enemy operator does have enough data to launch a SAM against you. A red launch light under these circumstances is strong proof from your APR-25 and 26 that you are in real trouble. As I've said, you're locked in a deadly game of matching wits with the enemy. But you have been furnished superior equipment. Equipment that can give you instantaneous and graphic warning of trouble and the direction from which that trouble is coming. In spite of the quality of your equipment, though, how well you can match wits with the enemy depends on how well you assimilate and make use of your ground training, flight training, and actual combat experience. Captain, as you train other pilots, don't underestimate the potentials of your own equipment. And above all, don't underestimate your enemy and the deceptive tactics he may develop